We are here today to speak out for the Christian and Yazidi community in Iraq, who for the past several weeks have been subjected to horrific atrocities. And we're here today to call on the world not to be silent, to speak out. We're standing in front of the United Nations and its Human Rights Council, and we're going to hear in a moment from a leader of the Geneva Parliament, from a leader from the Yazidi community worldwide, and from members of the Christian community of Iraq. And today, which is World Humanitarian Day, we will launch an appeal for the UN Human Rights Council to hold an emergency session. In the past month, we've seen terrible atrocities. On the 27th of July, militants from the Islamic State group blew up a mosque and a shrine dating back to the 14th century in Mosul. This followed their destruction in the same week of two other mosques in Mosul. The mosque of the Prophet Sheikh and of the Prophet Yunus. And yet, from the UN, we heard silence. Tens of thousands of people on August 4th from the Yazidi community fled their homes in northern Iraq after Islamic militants attacked the towns of Sinjar and Zunmar. And sadly, here from the United Nations Human Rights Council, once again, we heard silence. On August 6th, Islamic State militants used car bombs to kill 47 Shiites in a crowded market in Baghdad. And yet, here at the UN Human Rights Council, we heard silence. On August 6th, you saw on television the lawmaker, the member of parliament, the only one who represents the Yazidi minority group in Iraq's parliament, Vian Dakhil, said in an impassioned speech that 70 Yazidi children had died, women were being killed, sold into slavery, and 500 men had been slaughtered. She said, similar to the fate of every other Iraqi, my people are being killed. The Shiites, Sunnis, Christians, Turkmen, Shabak people have been killed, and now, she said, the Yazidi people are being killed. And her words went around the world as she cried as she gave this speech. On August 8th, we learned that jihadists from ISIS captured hundreds of Yazidi women in Iraq to use them as slaves. In the year 2014, capturing hundreds of women to use as slaves, 7 decades after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. On August 9th, we learned that 150,000 Yazidis fled their homes to escape ISIS. An average of 10 to 15 are dying every day from lack of food and water. A third of them are children. A doctor reported cases of 2 women who died in childbirth as a result. On August 10th, we learned Islamic State terrorists killed 500 people from the Iraqi Yazidi community. One witness said, I talked to people who ate leaves off the trees to survive. People who killed animals that were with them and ate the meat raw just to survive. This is happening today in 2014 in our time, in our world. On August 17th, militants announced their plan to force captured Yazidi women into marriage, quote unquote, after conversion to Islam. The next day on August 18th, we heard about Yazidi women in Iraq pleading for people to kill them, and then jumping to their death after they were just raped by militants, terrorists from ISIS. And on CNN we saw pictures of these little girls. We saw 15-year-old Aziza Hamid, one of the lucky few to make their way onto a helicopter to escape the scene on the mountain, having no food and water and trapped by these terrorists. We learned about Nayef Jassem, who lost almost all his relatives when Islamic State militants attacked the village of Kocho. Yazidi residents were given a deadline to convert to Islam before the terrorists moved in and began killing them. Mr. Jassem lost 3 sons and 1 nephew, saying that the militants, terrorists, killed 420 men and captured 1,000 women. He said people managed to survive because they hid under dead bodies. This sounds like something we heard a long time ago, something that caused the United Nations to be founded, and something that caused the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to be adopted in response to the atrocities that shock the conscience of mankind. But now today, in August 2014, we are seeing on TV, we are hearing on the radio, we are seeing on the internet atrocities that shock the conscience of mankind. And so today, 22 members of parliament and human rights activists from around the world have joined together in an appeal that was released just now on the internet and will be inside the United Nations in an hour or so to present this appeal, urging United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, to take leadership, to speak out, to not be silent, to demand that the United Nations Human Rights Council meet immediately in urgent session, in emergency special session, to live up to its mandate to protect the human rights of victims around the world, and specifically now the Yazidis, the Christians, and the other minorities in Iraq. We want to say today, no to silence, no to genocide, no to indifference. We want to see action. We want to see human rights. We want to see the United Nations stand up and protect the principles, the basic principles of humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, before we invite our speakers whose families are in the region, I want to invite someone who has been a leader for human rights causes and humanitarian causes, a member of parliament from Geneva, Dr. Pierre Weiss, to say with us a few words. Dr.